because it's a Monday, so I wouldn't be able to be available until 5 p.m. unless we choose to do a Saturday. On Saturday, I'm able to come in anytime in the morning. But if it's going to be during the weekday, I'm not available till 5 p.m.
Okay. Remind me, Chancellor, how much time are we allocating for this session? And if everyone else can agree, if 5 o'clock is a workable start time for us to get our work done, Chancellor, maybe that's the quickest resolution to Trustee Torres's dilemma.
Yeah, I think for now that makes sense to just put it at 5, but we may end up wanting to change the day to not be too rushed or go too late in the evening. But for now, if you make that change, we can pass it and we'll be good to go.
Right, and the main thing is to adopt a calendar with the best guess at this point, and you know it's dynamic, and if we need to or want to, we can always revisit this item. But with that, then, if there's no other changes,
well, Chair, do I need to, with the change, do I need to?
Does the maker and the second of the motion agree with the suggested change?
Yes, I agree.
I see you shaking your head, I guess, Josh. Okay, with that, if Laura Brower, if you'd call the roll now.
1 second. I thought that we changed the December meeting. Did we, or was that stated?
I already stated
Okay,
that.
sorry. I've got a problem. Everybody's on my screen now instead of just 5 of us, and I'm trying to figure that out.
Okay, Student Trustee Gonzalez.
Yes.
Trustee Kennedy.
Yes.
Trustee McKay.
Yes.
Trustee Torres.
Yes.
Vice Chair Chancellor.
Yes.
Chair Perez.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, that brings us to item 5.01, action to discussion to finalize update of Board of Rules of Conduct. And this is a continuation of prior board discussions. And we have with us for the viewing audience to assist us in this effort, Laura Shulkin from Lieber Cassidy Whitmore, who will help facilitate the discussion, and for the public's information, again, a formal welcome to the team, Laura.
Thank you. I'm privileged to be part of the team, and I'm so happy to support all of your incredibly important work. What I thought I would do to help us is we actually had our first meeting on this in January on a Saturday, actually in your boardroom, where we were all together before all of this, before we began managing the multiple pandemics we are managing at this point. And so that, I don't know how sheltering has affected you. It has distorted my sense of time terribly. So not only was this in January, which is a long time ago, it feels to me like it was a really long time ago. And so rather than just immediately pick up where we left off, I took the sort of slides that we used to sort of frame the discussion, whittled them down to a few, just to do a quick refresher of what we did in January. You worked hard in January. You made a lot of thoughtful comments and observations. So I thought I would just quickly. You're losing me?
Yeah, I did. Sorry, you were just cut out for a minute. I'm okay.
Okay. In any case, yeah, sorry about that. We are all dependent on whatever the internet decides it's going to do. Usually my internet is quite stable here. I apologize if it cuts in and out a little bit. But in any case, then we'll pick up where we left off, which is that you have a set of guiding principles that we worked on actually together in 2015, and that the then board adopted. Some of you were on the board at that time and helped craft that document. And then you were going to look at that and revisit it, modify it to the extent you felt it needed modifying to utilize going forward. And so this is a little bit clunky, so thank you for your patience. but I cannot be the host in these because of security issues. There are some people out there in the world that have way too much time on their hands. And the fun thing to do is to Zoom bomb board meetings. What else is there to do of import in the world right now? And so somebody has the slides and is going to put them up for me, right? And then allow me to share the screen so I can move through them. So either Patty or Laura, I know you're going to help me with that. Could I ask you to put up the slides now? Look at that. Thank you so much.
All right.
And and then I'm not getting, I don't have screen share yet. Can I think you said that you could shift that over to me. Yes.
No, I thought I was going to present for you, Ms. Shulkin, and you would just tell me when you want me to change the slide.
Oh, I'm so sorry. We must have miscommunicated. I'd asked whether I could share the document with you. Are you, if you're able to do that, that would be great. If not,
Yes.
we will just
Yes.
do it together. If you
Yeah,
can,
just let me know. Mhm.
yeah, if you could give me the share screen, that would be great.
Okay. Let's see.
Who knew we were going to all have to have these skills, huh?
Yeah. That's a nice map of California, Laura.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Laura Bauer is the host now. You gave it to Laura Bauer. I'm the other Laura. I'm the other Laura.
How many Lauras do we have now?
I'm one of your many Lauras.
Right.
Well, why don't we, rather than fuss with this now, I will just ask you to move the slides for me. So I just feel so bossy when I do that. Could you move to the first slide, please? Thank you. So to remind you, what we did was we had a conversation that began with you as the trustees and chancellors talking about what you identified as the attributes of a highly effective board, which included effective board management, how to have robust substantive dialogue, how to run an efficient meeting, and you offered a range of very astute observations around what it means to be a highly effective, policy-driven board. So I'm just reminding you to think back to that discussion. And then what we did, if you could move to the next slide, please. If you could move to the next slide, please. Oh, there we go. Is we identified certain overarching principles to help guide your self-governance, and I'm just reminding you of those here. And then we also identified underlying legal principles, so I could at least sound like a lawyer for part of the time. And then we got to the actual document. So the first of the overarching principles that we identified for highly effective boards is that effective boards utilize each meeting to advance the district's policies, goals, and strategic planning. To remember that board meetings are business meetings. You're meeting with your fellow trustees under the eye of the public and the scrutiny of the public. It's not a meeting with the public. And to keep in mind that your only opportunity to move your program forward is at board meetings. And that's a function of the Brown Act. And so one of the reasons it's so important to make those meetings highly productive is that you don't have the ability to get together between meetings to get all the stuff done that you weren't able to do at the meeting, right? That would be a Brown Act violation. So we talked a bit about different ways to improve the efficiency of your meetings, some of which I'm going to touch on in a minute. Next slide, please. And then we talked about how another attribute of highly effective boards is adhering to role. And the reason this helps you be effective is you're all very, very busy people. You have jobs, you have other obligations. And so it's particularly important that by adhering to role, if you only have a certain number of hours in a day or a week to devote to the district, that you're spending your precious time on setting policy, establishing and approving budgets, overseeing your one employee, your chancellor, and overseeing the legal conduct of the district. I mean, ultimate protection of the district from liability lies with the board. And so in this process of where I said, we're here to talk about the do's, not the don'ts. This isn't a don't do this, don't do that, but how do I help you do the things you want to do, which is to be the visionaries for the district and a policy-making body. Part of that is to be efficient with your own time. And one of the ways to be efficient with your own time is to focus on your core roles as trustees in setting policy and not in administrative or operational issues. And I know that that can be a challenging line to draw, and that's been part of the conversation we've been having. But as a big idea, that's what it is. And I think all of you have recognized that in
Ms. Schultz,
comments. Next slide.
Diana,
Yes.
you had a hand.
Oh, I can't see.
Yeah, I raised my hand. Laura, is Laura only frozen for me?
No, she's
so thank you for letting me know. I can only be with the slides up. I can try for letting. Oh no. Am I frozen?
Now I can hear you. Yeah, you're back.
So you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna take off my video just for the moment. It seems to, I've never had this problem before. But I know when other people have had problems with connectivity, they've turned off the video and that's improved the reception. So at least while the slides are up and I'm going through them, why don't I just turn off my video? Are you able to hear me, Trustee?
Yeah, I can hear you well. My only on this one where it says establish the budget, I've been spending time getting ready for the student trustee workshop and another trustee webinar that I'm doing with Andy Selesky, who's the CBO. And they say that the trustee's job is equally to establish the budget and to keep an eye on budget trends, both for your district and colleges. And so I don't know if just establishing the budget is enough, that we, also have to manage and look at the trends. So if something needs to be changed, I don't know if we just want to establish the budget and provide oversight of it, or I don't know what the wording is, but I don't think we can just establish it and walk away.
Okay. I think that in the trends and those sorts of issues, there's heavy reliance on your fiscal experts. But what I think would be helpful, because I think that's a great comment, is what I'm going to do is, as in part because I'm also aware we started a bit late, is quick overview. This is what we did in January. And these are slides that you already have seen. And I pulled out a few of the slides from the January presentation just to remind everyone of what we've done. And then when we get to the next piece, which is the engaging, rules of, ground rules, or however you want to call what they are, this may be something you want to bring up again.
So you want us to shut up?
Oh, no, I please, I would never tell you to shut up, at least not in public.
I'm kidding. I'm just going to mute myself and I'll let you do your thing.
Anyway, I'm just going to go through these fairly quickly, but please, if any of you do have a question or a comment about it, I'm more than happy to have a dialogue with you at any time. And then the next slide, please. Then the third of the overarching principles is that effective boards engage in purposeful governance. And I think that's really the key, that we're conscious and thoughtful about, you know, what we're doing and what we're saying. Are we taking time during the meeting to advance a board agenda item? Are we saying this to communicate with our fellow trustees? What's the purpose of what we're talking about? What's the purpose of what we're moving for? And just being very thoughtful about that. And then part of purposeful governance is what you have done in the past, which is to adopt ground rules for how you will govern yourselves, and then review them regularly, make them part of your evaluation process, and apply them consciously. One of the things that I talked about also in the in January around this purposeful governance is also in the spirit of building in board efficiency. The idea is that that this type of purposeful governance helps with efficiency because the conscious application of your own ground rules becomes the way you engage in ongoing training. So rather than just having lots of training on how to do things and then implementing them on your own, how you engage in the training, how you engage around your own rules is how you're doing training all of the time. One of the boards I work with, they have on every agenda a quick board self-evaluation at the end of the meeting. How did we do tonight? You know, so the conscious application of your own ground rules becomes the way you become self-taught to a certain extent, and is a way to sort of implement and grow professionally at the same time. Next slide, please. And then the last of these overarching principles is recognizing the nexus between purposeful governance and ethical governance. And so the duties of public officials and public employees are to promote transparency in government action, make government accessible to the public, apply rules equally and without bias, make decisions based on merit, not personal interest, provide the same level of service to all, treat the public with respect, dignity, and courtesy. You can see how purposeful governance will promote your capacity to carry out these core ethical parts of governance. Next slide, please. And then there's also sort of the legal backdrop that guides purposeful governance and ethical governance. One of which you're very familiar with are the accreditation standards, which define the roles of administrative leadership and as well as trustee leadership, and that given that one of your highest duties is to protect the accreditation of the institution, then adherence to role becomes an ethical responsibility of every trustee. Next slide, please. And then your own board policies and procedures around governance and ethics make the connection as well. So your own ethics and standards of practice include, under your board policies, your ethical duties include that you exercise authority only as a policy board and fully support board actions as a unit once taken, and that under your administrative procedures that you maintain oh my goodness, look at that. There you go. Yeah, I'm gonna blame a Zoom bomber for that one. Public atmosphere. I probably said that the last time I put these slides up here. I haven't looked at them since January either. Maintain public atmosphere where controversial issues can be debated openly, civilly, and fairly, protecting the dignity of individuals and the good and plain and the good of the district above personal or political concerns. So what this describes is this unique challenge. Trustees are a very unique type of political official. You carry, by nature of your elected office, individual First Amendment rights to both speak and hear from your constituents. But you are also trustees of an institution. And so you have your caregivers of the institution itself. And that means that you're constantly balancing between those responsibilities and relationships. And we've talked about that as well, and how you balance those in carrying out your duties. Next slide. And then we talked about part of purposeful governance is making your meetings as effective as possible. Since this is your only time to really advance the district's mission, that, and then of course through your committee work, which is also governed by the Brown Act. But your monthly meetings with each other become critically important time. And we identified a number of ways to make your meetings as efficient as possible. And these include the permitting a strong board chair that does give you some agility, because your chair can assist with building agendas, meeting with your chancellor, and doing other things in between meetings. Agenda planning and preparation, making sure your agendas are thoughtful and well crafted. Permissible pre-meeting communications with administration, which we're going to talk about in a minute, and how to do those in ways that adhere to the way we should be seeking information from staff, and making sure that we're not intruding on operations in the way that the board seeks information from staff, which we'll talk about in a minute. Effective use of ad hoc committees as a way to deal with unplanned for issues that come up that don't have ongoing subject matter jurisdiction or ongoing scheduled meeting times, but can create some flexibility in managing. And then the two that we spent the most time on were that one of the things that you said, which is that part of what makes a trustee effective is that they're well prepared. Part of being well prepared is having the information in advance that you need. And so what is the role of the board packet and meeting preparation, and how do we effectively use the information items and staff reports? And then how to appropriately use board reports during a meeting and making sure that they are not taking too much time during meetings. So those are some of the things that we talked about for running efficient meetings. Next slide, please. And so then we did get down into some detail on a particular issues that are challenging for boards and administration across districts, and work on ways to resolve. And one of them is this issue of information items and staff reports. Part of this is to control meeting length. And so when do we want to have staff reports? When is it helpful to trustees to have a report from staff? What is their purpose? It's to give the board information on matters within its purview, on things that are either relevant to upcoming action items, relevant to shaping policy, or relevant to shaping budget. So for example, if the board has as a policy priority improving workforce diversity, then you might want to talk with the chancellor about receiving a report on demographics and information around staff, or other things like that, because it's related to a policy imperative that the board has agreed is an issue that they are interested in, or it's a clear and current action item. How should board members interact with staff during reports? Clarifying questions directed to staff are really, I think, the only thing that we should be addressing staff. If we think a report does not have what we want in it, if we think it is missing information, if we think that it is incomplete in any way, the time to address that is not in a public meeting, but to be careful in the way that we respectfully engage with staff. So I think clarifying questions are fine. I don't understand what this means. Could you explain where this data came from, or how you created this particular report, are fine. If instead you are looking for more information, and I think this got alluded to a little bit earlier, the request for more information gets directed to the board president. I don't feel prepared to act on this item without additional information, or I'm concerned that without additional information, I'm not going to be in a position to help craft policy. The type of information I feel like I would need to help craft policy in this area is X. And that doesn't get said to the staff member at the podium. That is expressed to the board president. Next slide.
Laura, I got a question on that one.
Sure.
So if I like the concept and format of addressing those questions, and one of the issues or questions that I have is along the lines of the budget, because the budget never really goes away, right? Like, you know, whether it's a quarterly report, a tentative budget, the final budget, responding to state pandemics, like the budget's always alive and well. And I guess my point is, if we direct a request for more information or have a question to the board chair, and there's board consensus that a response or an answer or more information is going to come to the board, I wholeheartedly agree to that, because I think but we need to make sure that that actually happens, because then I think it eliminates looming questions that keep coming up. So I guess what I'm trying to stress to my colleagues on the board is, when we can get definitive answers on some of these concepts or questions embedded within the budget, I would like to get closure on some of those, or a change in practice, or a change in policy perhaps. But if we never as a board get some answers or a response, the questions remain. And so that's just something I just wanted to highlight and stress, sort of on the solution side of that last, it's not a bullet, but hyphen, I think, right down there.
Yeah, and right, and then actually you've also anticipated, thank you, the next slide, so we can go to that, because I just articulated the rest of the process that I think is a best practice. I'm going to turn my video off again, for managing requests from the board for additional information. And oh, I'm so sorry. You can go. I misspoke. You can go back to the other slide. This is a different topic, so let's stick with the staff reports. Thank you so much. So then what happens that you summarized, Trustee Chancellor, is that the board president then gets a sense of a consensus on the board that the information that's requested is something that that a majority of trustees agree is would be helpful. I also have talked with you in the past about what I see as the difference between majority-based decision-making and consensus-based. And the difference is that in a consensus-based model, there will be times where a trustee might not feel that the information is necessary for them, but because there's a strongly held minority view that it's very important, and a sense that unless the information is provided, it will create sort of a log jam that will not allow the board to move forward, a trustee would support the request for information, right? So that's sort of a more of a consensus-based model. I'm not saying that that's always what will rule the day, but that's sort of what the president of the board is looking for, is there a critical mass of trustees that agrees to request the information. It's not an action item. I don't think it needs to be voted upon. But the board chair polls the room, and if there is a consensus for the information, then that request only goes to the chancellor. And that's the next important piece. The chancellor then is the one who makes the judgment call, who has the expertise, the bandwidth, the availability to prepare the requested information. So for the most part, trustees are not reaching out to individual administrators and requesting information, right? So that's the way that should go. And I think the idea of closure is really important. Yes, the information has now been provided, and now we are going to move on. And I think there are different ways that you can do that. One of the ways will be, you know, if you don't feel that you are getting the information, there are two possibilities, and I think we've experienced both of them. Or you know, one possibility is there are different perceptions of what has and has not been provided, and what is and is not adequate, and those become public session discussions of whether we have gotten this information or not. You know, hopefully we can move away from having to have those conversations. And it may have to do with if people adhere to this process, being very clear about what the information is that's being requested, and make sure that it's very clear what's being requested, so that we can more easily identify that it has in fact been, we can now check that off the list. The information that was requested has now been provided. And of course, and I think you all know this, so it's not on the slide, but I'll mention it, whatever gets provided to the full board, right? And then I think the next slide is, we can go to, is about trustee reports. And just to remember that their purpose is to communicate with your fellow trustees and not the public, to inform them on matters that will assist your colleagues in shaping policy or taking action of some kind. This is not the time or place for communicating with the public regarding your activities. And that's one of those balances between your role as a political official and your role as a trustee. Of course, you have the right and the interest to let your constituents know and let the public know what your activities are, what you believe, what your agenda is, what your plans are. But our public meetings or your business meetings, that's not the time for those communications. That's what you do through your own outlets, whatever you're utilizing, Twitter or emails or flyers or whatever it is you're choosing to use to communicate on your own time and your own finances. Okay, next slide, please. So after we sort of went through those at some length and with a lot of detail and very thoughtful comments from you, I presented the draft. We're calling them the draft. They actually are your existing ground rules for whether you wanted to revise them. And that's where we were spending time and had not finished. So we're about to put those up. But before we do, I thought it might, one of the things we did not do last time because we didn't complete this process is get to, we had a couple of case studies. And let's just go to the next slide. And then the next one, thanks. So I want to just, let's do a sort of a check-in that I think we are, it sounds like we're all on the same page. But these are such abstract ideas that getting concrete can sometimes be helpful. And sometimes it's most helpful to be concrete through what your own actual experiences are. Sometimes it's easier to just take a step removed from that and use a hypothetical that is not what you're immediately dealing with. So I thought that might be helpful here. So let's just look at this together for a minute, not take too much time, and then dive into the actual document. Okay, in my hypothetical situation, the Vice Chancellor for Educational Services has just provided a detailed presentation on student completion rates at a public board meeting. Oops. Did everyone else suddenly get a different view?
Yeah.
Can that come down? It's somehow blocking the slide. Whoever's controlling the slides. So we were down, there we go. Thank you so much. Uh-oh, go back up to one. We're still on there we go. Thank you. This is a little tricky, but I appreciate the help. Okay, the Vice Chancellor for Educational Services has just provided a detailed presentation on student completion rates at a public board meeting. There's no pending action item regarding student programs or services. Trustee Smith is very engaged regarding student success and doesn't think the report provided enough information about the correlation of socioeconomic status and student success. Next slide. Should Trustee Smith, these are the options. This is a multiple choice hypothetical. A, during the meeting, ask the Vice Chancellor to discuss the correlation between socioeconomic status and completion rates. B, after the meeting, contact the Vice Chancellor directly to request additional information. C, during the meeting, ask the Chancellor to arrange for the information to be provided. D, during the meeting, propose to the board president that the board request additional information. E, during trustee reports, recount his longstanding advocacy for his disadvantaged students and concerns that the district is not seriously addressing these issues, or none of the above. Or all of the above, or any of the above. What do you think?
D.
Yeah.
Yay! D. Now, the reason E is not part of the answer, to my mind, is that it is not designed to communicate with fellow trustees around shaping policy. There will be a place for trustees to express their views on the importance of equity and addressing achievement gaps as you are shaping policy and as you're reviewing district practices and progress in that area. So trustee voices around the issue, very important, but in the way this hypo was presented, this was not for those particular purposes. This sounds more like talking to the public about views rather than talking to trustees to shape policy. Subtle distinction, but that's why I don't think E is part of the appropriate actions here. Next slide. Now, case study continued. After the Vice Chancellor completes his report, Trustee Smith turns to the board chair, as we just described as appropriate, and suggests the board request this information from the district. Trustee Green, exasperated,
You're cutting out again, Laura.
Seriously? You want another dog and pony show? Never had this before. Hold on. Okay, I've turned off my video again. See if that helps. I'm so sorry. I've not had this problem many presentations in the last 4 months. The real problem is we need more information. Party and race go hand in hand. What's the race data I've been requesting for months? Chancellor Mills interjects, there seems to be some confusion. We provided a comprehensive report on student success 6 months ago that includes all this information. The board requested a follow-up on the new funding formula. That's what's today's focus. Trustee Lee responds, what data? I haven't seen any data that drills down on completion rates and race. So next slide. Any concerns with how any of these people have handled themselves? What about Green's reaction? So Green was the one who said, snarkily, now that's me obviously telling you what I think of Trustee Green, is I'm sick of you asking for all these reports. So how could Green have expressed his opinions in a more appropriate way?
I guess he could have said, I'm comfortable with the information we have. I don't know.
Right. I mean, if you boil it down, Trustee McKay's got it exactly right. What's underneath the non-collegial tone is, well, there are two things. One is, I don't think I need more information, but also referring to them as dog and pony shows is very disrespectful of staff. And in fact, if Trustee Green thinks that reports have been dog and pony shows, which means that they are not providing critical information, then that's a conversation to have with the chancellor. So it's an odd comment. Green is both insulting a fellow trustee and kind of insulting the staff for the quality of their reports as well. And be careful about both of those. In any case, I think what I'd like to do is, unless you have more comments on these, what I'm hearing a lot of consensus of trustees around how we're supposed to try to manage these issues, and it might make more sense at this point to actually go to the draft document. This is the last slide anyway, so why don't we shut this down, and then Laura Bauer, on the other document, we had talked about my being able to edit it. Are we going to be able to share that document so I can take the board's feedback?
I think Patty was going to take that portion.
Oh, Patty, I'm so sorry. I don't. Okay, great. So if we could put up the draft, the ground rules from 2015.
Laura, if you have it and can share it, you can edit it. You should be able to share it now that Laura Brower's stopped sharing.
Okay, but the document isn't up yet, or are you saying I can? Oh, I can do that if you would like me to. What we had planned was you were going to put it up and then give me the share function. But if you give me a minute, I can put it up. I've got it right here. Hold on. Actually, oh, this is actually kind of handy because there's some additional. Okay. Can you see my screen yet?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So, and I'm going to keep my video off for now, just to make sure that we improve the connectivity. So to refresh your recollection, these are the ground rules you adopted in 2015. After the meeting in January, I had some further discussions with the board, with Trustee Perez around the discussion that everyone had and that you brought up again today about wanting more clarity around request for information. And I started to draft some additional language around how to request information from staff. And that I had shared in an underlined, what's underlined here. So the underlining part, I'm just letting you know, is not part of 2015. This was part of what we discussed right after our January meeting, when I think we were thinking we were going to be getting together again real soon. And then the world changed. So what I would suggest that we do is we go through these once very quickly, just so you have a sense of everything that's covered in them so that we don't end up making a comment about number 1, not realizing that your concern about number 1 is actually addressed in number 7 somewhere. Just read through them. And actually, I'm wondering, hold on, is if you can read it well enough, this is all of them, that I don't have to read aloud to you. And then if you read all 8.
Laura,
Yeah.
this was included in our packet, so I'm making the assumption all the trustees we've read these and are ready to discuss.
Oh, okay. I had thought they were, okay, great.
Not the highlighted.
But not the
version.
highlighted. That was that,
Right.
that was something I was going to share after you put yours up, but even better. Okay, great. So you've had them, you've been able to review them. That's great. So then what we should do, I think, is go through them. And this is your time to delete, add brand new things, edit what's already here. The idea is that we end up with a document, and then just to remind everyone, this is not a policy, it's not a procedure. The purpose of this is not to create another accountability piece that is external for your community, the college community, your constituents. They can look at your board policies and procedures and say you're not following your own policies and procedures. That's not what this is. This is an internal document for you to have to help guide yourselves and each other and hold each other accountable. So this is an internal document for you to use, and then as a metric for your own self-evaluation.
I have a brief comment on numbers 3 and 4.
Well, why don't we go through, can we start at the beginning in case people have anything on 1 and 2, Trustee Chancellor?
Yeah, of course.
Just numerically.
Sure.
So one of the things, by the way, that you did in 2015 is other districts that I've worked with, I've done, you will find that there are now districts all over the state that have similar looking documents, and then everyone has made them their own. This is often number 1, but you felt that it set the stage for all of them, so you made it a prefatory statement to all of your ground rules. But it is worth noting, because it's part of the core of the document, ground rules are flexible and advance mutual interests in promoting effectiveness, civility, and willingness to cooperate and collaborate in working together to serve the needs of students in the best interests of Ventura County Community College District. So that, again, this is a flexible document. It's for your internal use to promote your interactions with each other and with you and your chancellor. Okay. Number 1, the manner in which the board operates internally and how it engages with the chancellor, college community, and public impacts its effectiveness, the effectiveness of others in the college community, the district's work and educational environments, and accreditation. So process matters, how you do things and how you engage.
Laura,
Yeah?
just a minor point. After the word public, there's a comment. And how would it read if you just took that, comma, if you just took the comma out?
That's completely up to you. I can see arguments both ways.
Yeah.
Okay, no problem.
We can delete it. One of the things that I've been talking with trustees about more recently in the workshops I've been doing around this, I don't think it means you need to revise this, but it's a nice thought, I think. And that is one of the things we in the community college world get to do anytime we train adults, whether it's staff or faculty or administration or board, is I get to say everybody in a college community, every employee is a teacher in one way or another, because our students learn from the way we behave. And instruction doesn't just happen in the classroom. And I do think that is something to take to heart as a board. What a wonderful lesson in democracy and governance, how to reach agreement and solve problems where we can have profoundly different political views or different strategies and ideas on how to reach an end, and that there are ways to hear across difference and either reach a consensus or accept the will of a majority. And that when you do that, you are partly teachers, and I think that is that's profound. I think we live in a world now where we are experiencing how the behavior of people in the public eye and politicians affect people's ideas about democracy and fairness and attitudes. And that can happen in a positive or a negative way, and you have a chance to affect things in a very positive way. And I think that's part of the spirit of that number one.
Laura,
Yes.
just have a suggestion for the board to consider, and one would be to just break it up into two sentences, because it is pretty long. So the first sentence could be the manner in which the board operates matters, and then that could be period. And then you go into how it engages with the chancellor. So take the and out, and then you can kind of have the rest there. So how it engages with the chancellor, college community, and so on, impacts its effectiveness of others. But it just
Nice.
breaks it into two, and it makes that first sentence really strong.
Does that work for everybody? I like that.
I like that.
That's great. Anything else from anyone on number one? And I apologize, remember, I can only see about 3 of you at a time. So if somebody is raising their hand, I can't see it. Anything on one?
No, I don't have anything.
Great. So number 2, trustees and the chancellor act in good faith on behalf of the district. So this is critically important, that that when there are disagreements, it's because everybody cares about and is dedicated to the district, but has different ideas on how to get there.
I would ask for consideration to add the word collaboratively, because each of us may be acting in good faith from our perspective, but unless we act collaboratively, are we truly acting in good faith on behalf of the district? Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Act collaboratively in good faith.
Well, here's my one thought on that. The way this had been before you edited it in 2015 is it had this. And you said that was extraneous verbiage and you didn't need it, and so we took it out. But what it does, and I'm not saying you should put it back in, but what number 2 is about is your attitude towards each other, that you will not assume bad faith, that you won't think someone has a sneaky agenda, that you don't attack, right? Number 3 describes the collaborative engagement. And I do think it's important for to have a goal that's dedicated to that. This is how we will see, this is the way we will engage with each other. And that's the wrong word, because it's not about it. This is
okay. No, you make sense. That's helpful.
This is what we will assume of each other.
Yeah. Okay. And especially as you transition in number 3. Okay, that's good.
Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, yeah. I'll take silence as yes. Oh, and so then we get to 3, and I know at least Trustee Chancer has comments on this, others might. But I'll just read it quickly. There is quality, honest, focused, respectful, and patient debate on any matter of concern to a trustee or the chancellor that is within the purview of the board. Decisions will be based on relevant data and other reliable sources of information that have been made available to all members.
My only concern is with 3 and 4. In 3 you have based on relevant data, and then number 4 basically has the same sentence. Decisions are based on sufficient relevant data. So
Actually, that's interesting. I think we noticed, Trustee Chancellor, when we were preparing for today, that this was a redundancy that I didn't catch when you edited the document back in 2015. So I think you're correct. And so what I think this means is it was intended to be deleted here.
okay, yeah, and at least 2 of us weren't here in 2015.
Right. And so I think that was an error. I think that was just a redundancy that somehow didn't get caught when these were finalized. So
Laura, I'm sorry. I also have a comment for number 3.
please.
Okay. I just wanted to add at the end where it says, relevant data and other reliable sources of information that have been made available to all members. And I want to add in a timely manner, because reflecting back on a lot of the deliberation that we've had over the last 1.5 years, it really goes back to that information not being available to us as trustees in a timely manner. And so then there's these questions that are being asked at that moment. So that's one of the things that I wanted to include as a priority for us. There's also ad hoc committees or standing committees, and there's 2 members that maybe had information to what's going to be presented in action item, maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks before the other 2 members, and vice versa. And so I'm just trying to, I just want to have that added, and then we can decide, or, at that point, the chancellor can see how that information is provided. But at least one of our ground rules, because just in a lot of reflection, I feel that that's what a lot of our deliberation and a lot of the conversations we had as the board had to do with this information. So I would like to include it, if the board is in agreement, in the language. So at least it's in the language of our ground rules, and it's one of our values that we have, because that's how I interpret our ground rules, is the values that we have as a board that we hold to each other. And that's one of the ones that I feel, if we have, can really solve a lot of the questions and interactions we had in this last 1.5 years.
I have it. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I have an idea for how to maybe express this. Let me throw this out as an idea. So this is ground rules for how the board is going to conduct itself. And if we just said, made available to all members in a timely fashion, that's bringing in what the board's expectation is of others. But when I think about it, you made me think of something when you said that. Part of being a good manager is being clear about what your expectations are. And so maybe one of the things that will help with ensuring that that appropriate information is requested, and appropriate meaning that a majority or a consensus of the board wants it, and then once it's requested, you're getting it when you need it, is that part of the responsibility of the board when you request the information is to identify when you want it, and to have a conversation at that moment with the chancellor that says, when do you think what's a realistic timeline to get us the information? When do we feel like we need it? And the request for information has to include, after a collaborative discussion with the chancellor over what's realistic, what the expectation is for when it's going to be received. Because timely doesn't mean anything if the board doesn't set a timeline.
I agree, and thank you for that, because I was looking for the language, because even in my own notes, I wrote that it's very vague, because timely can mean, it's so subjective. It's timely on, it depends on whose perspective it is. Timely can be within a week or it could be within 3 months. It just depends. So
Right. So what I would suggest is put a hold on that idea for 1 second so I can get feedback on the new language, because I think that if we add something in, how we add in something around timeliness will be affected by whether or not you want to accept this new language, either in this form or in another form. So my thought is, let's get feedback on this part first, and then depending on what you do with this language, then talk about something around how we express timeliness. And I do want to make sure Chancellor, that you weigh in on that as well, because what my envisioning is that at the board meeting, if a request is made of you, that part of the request that comes to you at that point is an indication of when the board would like it, and with you providing input on whether that's a realistic timeline, so that when you leave, you're leaving not only with what the board has requested, but with an understanding of when the board wants it, and that you've been able to be a part of the process of just of figuring out when, what a timeline is that makes sense. So
Yeah, that sounds fine.
okay, thank you. So what about this new language? Because some of the feedback I got during the retreat in 2015 was that there wasn't enough direction around this process of requesting information. So I started to create some language that I was going to show to you that, when we got together again, and of course that became delayed because of of the pandemic. But so this is what I crafted for your review. When an individual trustee makes a request for data, it will be treated as a request for a staff report. Requests for staff reports will be discussed during the agenda setting portion of the meeting. Following the request, staff reports will be set in a future agenda if a majority of the board agrees that the information is relevant to the conduct of its duties.
So
Go ahead, Larry.
So I think the issue is also when you start stockpiling agenda requests, and then how do you prioritize them in order to have an efficient meeting in the future? During the period of time I was chair, I think we had 9 items, and some of them we didn't get to, and I believe we should have prioritized them better, made that part of the agenda somewhere in the packet. Before we left each meeting, we could say, well, the next meeting, what would be the priority? And I don't know how you would word that, or if that was even appropriate for what we're writing right here.
Yeah, that's a really interesting observation, Trustee Kennedy. This document currently does not include, and it could, this is your document, issues around how agendas are built, or items around the scope of authority of the board chair.
Because Laura, or Bernard, Chair.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I mean, it has been an ongoing concern. We've had, for probably at least a year of getting items on the agenda. We've had it brought up. Could we have a policy that if 2 board members wanted something on an agenda, it would automatically be placed on the agenda? So there's we clearly as a board really struggle with this. One of the things in a discussion with the chancellor that I had said is, we ask for things at a board meeting, maybe before we adjourn, that the chancellor has had a minute during a break, or can take a minute to say, here's the items that were requested. A couple of these won't take much time. We'll be able to get those out to you before the next meeting. A couple of these items are going to take significant staff time is their board consensus that we would like to get this information. And I just think that would, if we just took the time to do that, and yes, we want it, the chancellor could say this is going to take at least 2 months. So then we know we won't see it on agenda for 2 months. And we also, if it's a piece of information that a trustee has asked for, the chancellor knows that there's board consensus that we'd all like to see that information, or not.
I think we're talking about two different things, and I think I've got an idea that may help with this. That was very, Trustee McKay, your comment was really interesting because I think the board is conflating two things. One is the receipt of information and what happens at a board meeting. So the Brown Act permits an administrator to do a one-way informational communication to trustees. So in my mind, the idea that there will be a rough deadline or timeline for producing information doesn't mean that it will be in the form of a report that has to be given at the meeting. And maybe that means this may be actually causing some confusion, and we shouldn't say that a request for data is a request for a staff report. Maybe we don't say that, because a request for information could result in a memo from the chancellor out to all the trustees within the timeline requested. It doesn't mean that it has to be at a board meeting.
I like that idea. I've long advocated for the use of informational memos that would lighten the agenda load. And also, I think that may answer a question that I had regarding the nexus between, in number 3, debate on any matter of concern to a trustee versus the operative language in number 4 about the process of determining how it will be treated. And again, I may be conflating request for information with request for a staff report.
Yeah, I think 3 is about respectful engagement. This is how the trustees will engage with each other on any matter of concern. This doesn't have to do with information that comes from your staff. The decisions are based on relevant data. I've been really big on data-driven decision making, but I have recently had some folks interpret that word very, very literally. That has caused confusion. If you wanted to say data or other information, that would be fine. But I'm thinking that that when an individual, maybe we say it more the way it was expressed by Trustee Chancer earlier in our conversation. When an individual trustee makes a request for data, it will be, I'm going to,
Laura, I don't want to interrupt your train of thought, so when you're done, I'll comment.
we can change this, but I just want to get something down.
Yeah.
Here, I'm going to put in just for a placeholder. This is where I was envisioning something along the lines of what Trustee Torres was saying. When an individual trustee makes a request for data, it will be made to the board chair, the data or other information. It will be made to the board chair. The board chair will then informally poll the board to see if a majority supports the request. If so, the request will be made to the chancellor. The request will include a date by which the information will be provided with the date established collaboratively with the chancellor.
So Laura, I think, yeah, you know, that's looking good. I have just a couple questions. One is that, you know, this handles things very well during a board meeting, and I just want to, under the, you know, ground rules there, will all the requests for data or other information happen just at the board meetings? Because now I will get, you know, emails from individual trustees asking for information, and sometimes it's pretty extensive, the amount of information. I'll often respond and then copy all trustees on that, but I have no idea whether or not that information is of interest to all trustees or not. I think it's important that I clarify any questions around some things we may be doing or to help explain an agenda item, that sort of thing. But I just, it helped me to really understand and be clear here about when this applies.
Right. I think the word, starting with when, it presumes that it's during the meeting, but the intention is the meaning of the section of this number 4, and I understand wanting to make it clearer, is that the only time that trustees are requesting information is in the board meeting. Now, the caveat to that that I've heard both from you, Chancellor Gillespie, and trustees here, as well as from any other CEO that I've talked to, is they're fine. You're fine, as I understand it, with a very short question. Somebody's trying to figure out something on an agenda. They're trying to get ready for a meeting, and they've got a question where no research, 5-10 minutes, I can get you the answer. You're more than happy to do that. Is that right?
Right. Yeah.
Right. It's the wanting more detailed data and information that requires work that needs to be, in other words, that the board is not going to intrude on the work of the district unless a critical mass of trustees thinks it's important.
Chair?
Trustees, Laura is address your request
Laura?
to speak to Laura. Yeah, that's easier.
Laura, what if it said when an individual trustee makes a readily available, request for readily available information or data? Oh, I see.
I'm writing up what Trustee Kennedy just put in, just suggested about readily available. My general thinking on this, Chancellor, is that those still should only come to the Chancellor, and then you, if you need your CBO or your head of HR to provide the quick answer, you delegate it. Is that the way you would like it handled, or do you think that that would be my recommendation, rather than trustees can call any administrator with what they think is an easy question?
Right. How you initially stated it would be preferred from
Yeah.
my perspective.
And just so
Laura, I think the problem we're not talking about is we get our agendas on Thursday, for example, and we're expected to vote on an item on Tuesday night, often I read my agenda over the weekend, so that leaves only Monday for me to ask a question. That's, you know, the requests for information are often to be able to vote on something appropriately. And sometimes there's not always agreement. I mean, and sometimes in order to vote, we don't all agree on how much information is needed. And that's what I don't think we're addressing.
So I think that the way that works is as follows. Trustees may make requests for information after they've looked at their agendas and realize they feel they need more information to the chancellor, but the rule still applies. If it's something that requires more than 5 or 10 minutes, then you're not going to get the information before the board meeting. And either that ends up being okay because other trustees or a majority didn't feel that information was critical and you're able to move forward, or a majority of trustees feel that the board packets were incomplete, or that the board should have been better prepared at an earlier meeting because it's a very complex issue and you should not be being asked to act on something without having had at least a couple of meetings to gather and digest information. And if that's the case, then that's a conversation you're having with the chancellor in closed session. I think that's the better answer than to say, because that's a possibility, any trustee that thinks the packet is incomplete can call the chancellor and say, I need more information, or I don't think I can vote on this item. And the chancellor has to then respond to all of those.
Okay, it is something that's occurred. And so then would you recommend a trustee abstain because they don't have the information, or votes no because they don't have the information? What is the appropriate response for the trustee who doesn't get what they need?
I think that is completely up to the individual trustee. I think that is a First Amendment right.
And if the board, let's just say it's the budget, for example, and it needs to go forward, and yet 3 trustees feel like they didn't have enough information, and it's stopping something really, really important. Is that just the way it goes? Okay.
I think that, and I don't mean to be at all flip about that, but I think that if that were to happen, that's a conversation you're having with the chancellor in an evaluation session. And maybe you have a special meeting around it. I think that there are a lot of signals that should, especially in some of the processes that we've been talking about, not that, and I think that you are speaking hypothetically, as I am, but if we are creating a process with clearer expected timelines for getting information out to trustees, and a more thoughtful consideration of, is this something we all really need? Yes, it is. When do we really need it? We need it by X date. See, that isn't really happening yet. And my hope is that's a preventive to the type of scenario you're describing, where suddenly you don't have the information you need to act on a critical item. And in fact, I think if under your scenario of realizing a couple of days before a meeting that a majority of the board doesn't feel that it has the information to act on an item, I'm not sure there's time to get that fixed anyway, in part because the 3 trustees can't be talking to each other about it. Right, so there won't be a sense of there are these 3 trustees who all agree and we need more information, because you will not have been able to have a conversation with each other to reach that understanding. All we have are individual trustees with their disparate questions picking up the phone and calling the chancellor. And the danger on the other side, I think, is quite real. And that is that district administration can get very, very bogged down in the day or 2 before a board meeting, based on the individual particular concerns or requests of trustees that are not widely held. And then suddenly you have very, very busy staff on very, very individual, particular issues of individual trustees. It's hard to tell until you get into the meeting where everyone is together that you had trustee agreement that there wasn't enough information. Because it's hard because there's no place to express that until you're all together.
I mean, having been board chair and having to navigate this for a year with our board, there were times when, you know, a trustee would ask for information, not get it, and therefore vote no. We had a lot of 3-2 votes that were 3-2 votes for lack of information as opposed to an opposition to what was being presented. And yes, the business goes forward, but you know, they just aren't particularly pretty when a trustee votes no on paying our students the legal minimum wage simply because they didn't get the information that they asked for. It just doesn't, the optics of that are never very pretty. And as a chair, we struggled a lot with it. And so I'm looking for a way for us to not struggle, to come away from this, not struggling with the same things that we have struggled with so far.
Well, one of the things I would hope for, and I think this comes with, and may be addressed in some of the the ground rules that are coming up, is in this tension between my individual rights as an individual political official and my trusteeship of the district, is where do I find that balance? And I would suggest that because part of your caregiving responsibilities to the district involve trying to maintain a collegial and harmonious relationship with your fellow trustees, that in the same way I encourage trustees to respect a strongly held minority view and say, you know what, I don't particularly need this information, but on this one, I know this issue is not going to go away. I'm going to support getting it. The minority trustees have to realize, I believe, that there are certain times where unanimity on a vote matters, or showing respect for the judgment of the majority colleagues speaks both to the subject and to fostering positive relationships with your fellow trustees. Everybody is responsible for that.
So Laura?
So I would say that there are times, I'm not saying as soon as you see there's a majority, just vote with the majority and make everything a unanimous vote. I'm not saying that at all, but there are certain times where speaking with one voice is important. I would say, for example, in supporting your chancellor, speaking with a unanimous voice can be very important. And there are other times where there's value in that, and it's part of building goodwill with your fellow trustees. And so and where this comes in the situation that Trustee McKay is describing is, and why I think asking for flexibility from a minority makes sense, is because the disagreement is once removed. It's not a disagreement over the issue. It's a disagreement over whether or not the information that I wanted in order to vote on the issue was information that was important. And I would say that if a critical mass of trustees say this information is not important and we need to move forward based on what we have, that trustees be willing to accept the judgment of the majority sometimes in those situations and go, you know what, I would have liked this additional information, but I'm willing to make now I'll vote on the information that we have. And based on what's in front of me, I can support this. So as what this describes though, and then I'll stop, is this document is about trying to build a level of goodwill among you, because then these situations are going to be dealt with on a very case-by-case basis, but from a place of goodwill.
Laura?
Yeah.
Yeah, just to add real quick, and again, I'd like to emphasize to all the trustees that, you know, it is very important that you're able to get answers to clarifying questions on board items ahead of the meetings. And I really encourage that to occur. And if you recall, whenever you do get questions and they are related to clarifying or explaining board items and they're not going to take a huge amount of staff time, then those responses are prepared and they're shared with all of you. And you know, that would continue. And I think, Trustee McKay, to get to your point that you just made, having a clear process of data requests going to the board chair at a meeting and then the board deciding whether they want it or not does give me the clear direction on what to do, and we can have the conversation around a timeline. Because otherwise, if I'm getting the request from one trustee or two trustees, then I'm left as you know, deciding to do it or not do it, and that's not, you know, I'm here to serve the board as a whole, and it's very important that I'm getting direction from the full board. And I think the process Laura's describing would help then to have the discussion that allows then for the board to be giving me direction on, yes, spend staff time on this, or no, don't spend staff time on that. And that'll be helpful.
Laura,
Laura?
go ahead, Larry. You asked something first.
So it seems to me that in Diane's case, that we weren't doing that. We weren't going to the chair for information. Then the chair said to everybody, how would you like us to take the time to do that research for the agenda coming up? That makes sense. And some separation between, let's say it's not agenda item that will be voted on, because you don't want to get to the point where everyone is bringing up their viewpoint on an agenda item that may come up. So some consideration, could we put some consideration to where if it's agenda item, it's one thing, but if there's a request for something that's not on the agenda, that it would still be treated the same, but that if it was something that was readily available, then the chancellor would just direct that done and we would all get it.
So you're suggesting deleting the in preparation for board meetings. So it would look like this. Trustees may make requests for information to the chancellor, and that information will be provided if it can be provided without conducting research or analysis. And that was, Chancellor, that was my, I've not come up with a better way to contain it. I didn't think it sounded right to say if you can do it within 15 minutes or a half an hour, quantify it by time. So I tried to limit it by the type of work it would require. And my assumption was if it doesn't require research or analysis, then it's something that's readily available. And maybe I say it that way. We provided if it is readily available. Maybe that's
that's what I suggested, readily available.
Yeah, that's right. That was your language. I somehow lost track of it.
We actually have language in our policy that says something about that the chancellor decides if it will take undue staff time. That
Right.
would be then the same, that it would follow the other language in our policy.
Yeah, I was going to bring that question up because now we have language in two different places. We have it in policy on, you know, roles of the chancellor or roles of the trustees, and now we're creating ground rules that there's similarities, but they certainly don't mirror the same verbiage. So that's one of my concerns. But I do have another concern I'd like to ask as well. I don't know if it's a good time or if you want to finish typing.
Well, then just to finish, So all other trustee requests for data shall be made at board meetings. And then that request was when the board chair will make a straw with informally and decide whether that will be. So I think it differentiates just some information that won't be necessarily on the agenda versus information that will be on agenda, and that's all I'm asking for.
And where you provide, I'm not sure, is that for outside of the meeting requests or at meeting requests, Trustee Kennedy?
The first sentence, I think, fits outside of the meeting.
Right.
And then the second one will be, the second sentence clearly states it's shall be made at the board meeting and direct to the board chair. So in other words, I don't see the extra work on the board chair to have to poll all the other trustees for, was it 16% or 18%? And the chancellor can readily answer that.
I'm not sure I understand what you're saying, Trustee. I'm so sorry.
Well, I'm not making myself clear enough. Well, this is a complex subject, but let's just say that it's not an agenda that came out and a trustee wants information. And in this case, the first sentence is it's directed to the chancellor. And the next sentence is during a board meeting, it's directed to the board chair. So I see the first sentence is readily available information that the chancellor can answer through his delegation or he or herself, himself. And then the second sentence is during actual board meetings. So because all of us will sometimes ask the chancellor for information that may not be an upcoming agenda. And so if it's an upcoming agenda item and a trustee wants information, I see that as going to the board chair, who will do a quick poll and then direct the chancellor to support the request.
I think what's here is covering the situation you are trying to identify, if I'm understanding you correctly.
No, it does.
Okay. Oh, I thought you were expressing a concern.
No, I think the way you wrote it, it's.
Gotcha. Oh, I thought you were, okay. I did add one thing while you were speaking that had been in the back of my mind, is that if we're expressing in writing that any trustee may approach the chancellor and request information that's readily available, which I think is fine, I do think we need to add in that any such information provided will be provided to the full board.
Yes, good point.
Right?
Yes.
Wouldn't that be a Brown Act violation though?
No.
Not that.
Absolutely not.
No, not that. I'm talking about the board chair will then informally poll the board. If that happens
At the meeting.
That's at the meeting.
Okay, I thought Trustee Kennedy was saying if information is requested outside of the meeting, the chair will then informally poll.
No. That you're 100% right, Trustee Chancellor. That would be a Brown Act violation, but that's not what this is. Yeah. So we have two categories. Any information that is readily available, any trustee can pick up the phone and talk to the chancellor, and the chancellor will provide the information or delegate it to the appropriate staff to provide it. And when it's provided, it will be provided to all trustees.
Right.
That's really important. Everybody gets it. Then it says all other trustee requests for data or information shall be made at board meetings.
Right.
And directed to the board chair. The board chair will then informally poll the board to see if a majority support the request. If so, the request will be made to the chancellor. And then this is based on Trustee Torres's a comment, which was helpful. The request will include a date by which the information will be provided with a date established, collaborative with the chancellor. And that date and that information may end up coming back by that timeline as a board report at a meeting. It could end up being in a memo that's just sent out to the trustees. It could be part of a chancellor's regular, a newsletter. It could come to the back to the trustees in all sorts of ways. It doesn't have to be at a meeting necessarily. So how does 4 look now?
Good.
Laura, just real quick around it. So just to clarify too, that where it says the request will include a date by which the information will be provided, but we'll also just have a discussion where I could provide information on the amount of work, or even if we have the staffing to do it as well. Correct? Or at least let the board know, here's what it's going to take to do it.
Well, what this may not be enough to get where you need it to be, but that's what I was trying to do with this language here.
Yeah, I think that can work to do that, because again, we'll have to be able to have the resources, capability, and things to meet a request, and that would all be part of the conversation.
No, I'm not envisioning that this is a ultimatum dynamic. This is all about collegiality and professional respect. If somebody's asking for a lot of really complex data, now maybe what you're saying, Chancellor, is you may not be able to on the spot give a good estimate of how long it'll take. You may need to talk with your data analyst or your staff to
I could see that. I could see that happening. Yeah.
Laura, I just wanted to give an example. So as a board, we've been talking a lot about the importance of diversity. We've talked about looking into it a little bit more in depth, and then adding action to it. And it's been a dialogue for a very long time. In our last meeting, we talked about that this was a priority, and we did ask as a board, what's a date? And the response was maybe 2 to 3 months. So we left without a date. And so I like this language because as a board, we're able to say, okay, this is our priority based on policy, strategy, budget. And so we're going to basically explain why this is a priority, why we're requesting this information based on those 3 areas that we talked at our last, at our board evaluation meeting that you mentioned, and then with a date. And of course, I like the word collaboratively, because of course there's a conversation about the amount of work that it takes, and then we can actually say a date. And I think as a board, that's been what's missing this whole time, is that we have no dates. And so there's been information that there's a consensus of the board. It's all 5 of us. But we never set a date. So a lot of that information till this date that has to do with the development of our policy, with decisions regarding our budget, with our strategic goals, we don't have that. And so I like this very much, because now it'll allow us to continue moving forward, because that's been missing all along. And when we talk about that accountability piece, we adopted a resolution. We're telling our community, hold us accountable as a board. And I figure as a board, this is really good for us to be able to have this conversation, have this, and having this date. So I'm looking forward to this, because I heard from a board member, and help me find a yes to this information that we're needing, and how do we make this work? And so I feel can get us there. So I like it very much the way it's written. I think it's very collaborative. I think we're coming together as a board alongside with our chancellor in determining when information can be provided that is reasonable, and we don't continue moving forward, because there's a lot of things that will always come our way. It could be a pandemic, and could be so many things, but I just wanted to give that as an example to just validate how much I think this is really good.
It's often helpful to use concrete examples so that we don't get too esoteric in our language, and I appreciate that. I think what I'm hearing from the chancellor is that There will be some situations where, and actually to stay with your example, for example, your example, Trustee Torres, the type of data and information that the board may be looking for around diversity and demographics is often very technical. And I've, this is one of my areas, and I've trained people on data collection around diversity, very, very complex. And in fact, there's a whole new methodology for doing relevant data collection that's been created by some HR experts, and I've been training with them around the state on that. Very, very complex use of census data and other data sources to do this. So I could imagine, I would not expect a chancellor to know off the top of his or her head to know how long it would take to do particular types of studies at a meeting. And I think that may be what Chancellor Gillespie was getting at. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that you may not know on the spot, this will take me 2 weeks. And then have your head of HR go, are you crazy? 2 weeks? I couldn't possibly do this in 2 weeks. So I'm adding in as a suggestion to incorporate that concern. If a date for
that
production,
helps. Yeah, that clarifies that. Yeah.
If a date for production cannot be established at the meeting, what I'm trying to do here, Trustee Torres, is to keep the level of vigilance that I think you're asking for, and I understand it. It would say if a date for production can't be established at the meeting, the board chair will work with the chancellor to establish a timeline after the chancellor has had an opportunity to confer with staff. So that what I'm imagining is there might not be a date at the meeting, but there'll be a date within a week of the meeting.
So Laura?
Yeah.
So I think there's a difference between something that's a full board agenda item or a study session and a request for information. And absolutely, if it's going to be a full agenda item, then we do have a place in our agenda for our regular meetings at the end to entertain what will be agenda items for the future board meeting. So if we use that, once we've got the data, then I would think we could lock in what the majority of the board would like to see in the next meeting or the one after.
So right now, Trustee Kennedy, I think what we're talking about is what are the gatekeepers going to be for burdening staff? That's what we're not talking about what's coming back to the meetings. We're talking about when do...
Right. That's my point too. That's my point. So, we're talking about, just research.
Yeah, and I think where your comment is relevant over agenda items is going to be in whether trustees think the request is relevant, right? So a trustee says, "I'd like a study done on, climate change." I don't mean to. I don't want to be silly, but
no, you're saying what I'm saying. You're saying what I'm.
Then what will happen is trustees will say, what is this relevant to? How is this helping us with an upcoming action item? How is this helping us shape policy? How is this helping us evaluate the budget? If you're not seeing that on either an upcoming agenda or as a strategic a priority, then you're not seeing that as a trustee, then you're not going to support asking the staff to collect the information at all. To me, that's where the agenda has relevance to this analysis, which is what are we asking staff to collect information on? It's not just the things that we happen to be interested in, it's the things that will help us do our work. And that can be measured in different ways. What's an upcoming agenda item? What are our key policy initiatives? I mean, I want to be careful that we don't just lock it into an immediate next agenda item. If you, for example, do identify improving the diversity of the workforce, as a critical strategic initiative, then I don't think you're going to say, well, it's not on the next agenda, so I don't agree with getting the information. And in fact, that'll undermine one of Trustee McKay's concerns, which is you're getting information too late. If you tie the information only to what's at the very next board meeting, then there'll be certain complex issues where you're getting information too late in the process when you're right at the moment you're being asked to act upon it. So the question of what's relevant to your work is going to be a little bit bigger than just what's coming up at our very next meeting. And I don't think that's what you were suggesting, but I'm sort of painting the extremes to make the point. Right now, this is just about, if we can just get closure on this piece right now, on when is staff going to be asked to collect information. Number one, there has to be a critical mass of trustees that agrees it's important. And that's when the issues will come up of how does this connect to our strategic initiatives, our priorities, our values, our mission, our agenda. Then we're now talking about setting some kind of way to measure, did we get what we needed and did we get it by when we needed it? And I hear a voice, but it's not, somebody not on my screen, so I can't.
Oh, it's me, Josh.
Yeah, hi there, yeah.
I just want to bring up one thing, and I don't want to belabor number 4. We spent a lot of time on it, and but one concern I have is, and I've been in this situation before. Somebody asks a question, and on the surface of the question, I go, I don't need that information, but or I don't need that data. But without actually seeing the data, how can you place judgment sometimes on that data? So it's just a slippery slope to say, well, if the majority in all cases doesn't feel that it's important, it's hard to place importance on something when you can't see the data you're already evaluating or placing importance on. So I guess I'm just concerned that maybe some of the flexibility's not there. But I think it goes to collegiality with the trustees and some flexibility on their parts to say, well, you know what, this isn't something I need, but maybe when the data comes, it will have some relevance, right, or it will be important in the decision-making process.
So Trustee Chancellor, I think that's exactly right. But I also think it's a two-way street.
Absolutely.
Right. And so it also means that if a majority of trustees are saying, we really don't think we need this.
Sure.
That maybe they're right. And,
oh, yeah.
and stopping and listening to that perspective also, right? And considering that possibility. And in fact, one of the this is something one learns when you do investigations in particular, that part of the way we analyze is by what is absent that I need, and so I don't think you absolutely have to know what the information is in order to know whether you need it or not. What you do is you look at what you have and you say,
yeah, but that's also making a decision in spite of data or in light of data, you know, and sometimes I think it's a slippery slope. You're kind of asking us to take a board majority on making a decision in spite of data at times if a minority group does ask and request for data. So that's all. We don't need to get in a debate over it. And I totally understand and see your point and recognize it's a two-way street. And I think we've spent a lot of time on number 4, but I wouldn't sleep well at night if I didn't bring that up, that it's hard to place value or you know, relevance on data when you can't see it. So that's all.
I would just disagree with Josh. We've spent so much time on 4 and we haven't talked about the elephant in the room, which is when we look at our budget, Josh has asked on numerous occasions to see the 3 college budgets broken out in a similar format. And we're going to come up on having to vote on our budget. And is it going to be there? We've had, you know, I think it's important. It's, you know, I went back and looked at the trustee training that we should be looking at trends at the colleges as well as our district. And we keep talking around it, and it is the elephant in the room.
Trustee McKay, are you thinking that the way this is currently described in 4 addresses the elephant in the way that you think it should be addressed or not? I'm not sure.
I think that we're going to come up to a meeting where we need to vote on something and the elephant may not have been addressed, and I'm concerned about it.
So what's happened, Laura, I think from,
I know, I'm going to jump in only because I want to be careful that we not get into a discussion of the specific issue.
We're losing you at a critical time.
The request for budget. Hold on.
Laura, you might have to deactivate your video.
I did it. I turned it off. Yeah, I think that that everyone I think that we having that in our minds in thinking about how to craft this is not a bad idea at all. But I don't think we want to have a discussion right now about that particular issue. I think that there are different views on what was provided, what wasn't provided, whether what was provided, all of those things. And I'm not sure how productive it would be to try to have that discussion right now. I think what we want to do is if you don't think this provides a process to deal with those situations, then we have to look at the process again.
Laura, I just wanted to add that I think it does, because we have a timeline now. And so what we didn't have before was information was requested. And I know Trustee McKay just brought a specific example. And so let's say budgets, because it's something that comes quarterly, and when sometimes it's something that needs to be voted on a quarterly basis and it's a final budget, but there's some information, and it's the same question that had been asked before. And so, but we never had a timeline of when to get that information back. So sometimes there could be another meeting and there was still maybe those questions regarding some type of not knowing where a certain amount of money, where was it transferred, where did it go? And so I think with this timeline, it's helpful. There's a lot of different examples. There's information that was requested and approved by all of the boards to get this information since May. We got this information 2 months later to have a decision. We got some information on a Wednesday to have a decision by Monday. And so, but this was asked of 2 months before, but we never set a date. So when we met on May 12th, it was agreed that 2 trustees would be able to get this information because it would be part of this committee. And, but we never said this information is going to be provided to you within a week or 2. And what we ended up receiving was all this information 2 months later, and then expecting those 2 trustees to provide now a response within. So I just wanted to give us an example.
Yeah, I think my concern about the examples is I really want to help us continue to look to the future rather than the past, in part because I do think that there are some divergent views about some of the things, and I have an opinion on them, but I think the more we look to the past to the future, I'm worried we're going to get bogged down. I don't want to move off also, Trustee McKay, the issue, which is there are 2 different ones. There's the timeliness, which Trustee Torres brought up, and I think that's resulted in fleshing out 4 in ways that improve it, which is great. But I think the
Laura, you're cutting out badly.
Sarah, can I suggest a quick bio break, and then maybe Laura can get her stuff straight?
Trustee, I'm not sure.
She can also call in on the phone, maybe might help.
Laura, did you hear that?
Yeah. I've just never had this happen before, so I'm not particularly well knowledgeable in what to do about it. I can try doing that, muting and using the phone.
Well,
I
I think I've heard a call for a quick break. We've been at this for a little bit anyway, so I think it's time for, I show 7:26. What's the pleasure of the board? How short a break?
5 minutes
Man,
works for me. 5 minutes
pardon?
works.
Okay,
5 minutes
so,
works for me.
well, let's say we'll come back at 7:35. Okay, everybody? Thank you.
So we took a break. We were looking at number 4, and I think, I'll take my lead from you guys, whether we're done with this, whether we want to try to address the issue of, my thought is that this addresses the 2 different issues that you guys have been struggling with. One is getting information what you're in at the time that you need it. The other is clear expectations over what in fact is being provided, because it hasn't been requested clearly by the full board. And so there's been, I think that has increased frustration for individual trustees, perhaps, in thinking they're getting information or not knowing if they're getting information. So I would ask you to look at 4 with your experiences without rehashing them here, and see whether you think this is going to address the concerns going forward. Like if these issues came up now for requests for information.
Laura?
I think all we can do is try.
Yes, trustee. Yeah, and trustee Kennedy. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's what we've got so far is a vast improvement over 2015, and that some of the issues coming up can be worked out, and that we should just move on. This is a better than we had.
And you know what, we are, continue, you just think of it as building the plane while flying. This is your document. You can revise it anytime if it's not working for you.
Okay, because I had a recommendation for number 5.
Okay, so we're ready to go to 5?
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay. Yes, let's do it.
okay. For number 5, I was just going to add at the very last line, it says the board respects the request of members to revisit issues when based on new information. And what I was going to ask the board to consider is revisit issues when a board quorum agrees to it. So if there's a board majority who's wanting to revisit the issue, that at that point it's going to be brought back to the board. It could be a consensus, but if there is a board majority, then we can revisit it, and it doesn't have to be specifically because it's new information. So that's the new language that I wanted to introduce. So I wanted to omit based on new information, and I wanted to add either board quorum, board majority agrees to it.
I gotcha. Let's see.
Daya, you're muted.
My concern with that is if we have an election coming up, the board turns over, is every 2 years are we going to go back and revisit things because we have a different board majority? So, I mean, I don't mind visiting an item every now and then because, we want to revisit something. I just don't want to revisit something every 2 years because the board majority changes. I just think that's a bad practice. So I just would like to, if these are ground rules that we want to live by, that, that we have a reason for revisiting an item that makes sense.
And I think so. I think for myself, as we look at action items, so this would be something, and we're trying to move forward as a consensus. So as we're moving forward as the board, And I look at it as just continuing to move forward, because whoever, we don't know what the outcome will be with new elections, but whoever stays is a model to the new members of the consensus and how we do business. And this would be if there was something that were to come up and for some reason the board is deciding we want to revisit this. And it goes back to
Learn
when,
to understand you much better if I can get familiar with the way you.
I've lost, that was me. I've lost the screen and I'm trying to get back to it. But I had a question, a process question, Laura, clarify.
Could I just, before you jump, before we lose the thread on this one, I just wanted to say, Trustee Torres, I think your concern is addressed by the first sentence. I don't think we need more language. It says, trustees avoid backtracking. Once the board has heard and considered the views of its members and acted, all members will respect the action of the quorum unless and until the board takes up the matter again. A board can always vote by a majority to take up a matter again. And you couldn't, I don't think you could even put in language that says that the majority of the board may not bring something up again. So I think the first sentence actually addresses your concern. Then it's simply saying that the board respects the requests of members. So that would be to revisit issues when based on new information. So that has to do with individuals getting to put things on the agenda. This isn't about the whole board taking up a matter again. It's, I want this on the agenda again. Well, no, we actually voted on it. We're not going to put it on the agenda again, unless you have new information.
So Laura,
that's what I think this is about.
okay. Okay, that
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Trustee Perez.
Yeah, my question, it's a process question. I think you sort of answered it. When the board has taken action on an agenda, I've always understood that that question cannot be revisited again unless a member that voted in the majority brings it back for reconsideration. But I think there's that subtle difference between reconsidering a past action versus discussing the topic based on new information.
Right.
Okay. All right. So is it that 5 is
Are
okay?
we good on 5?
Yep.
Oh,
So
look, light at the end of the tunnel.
yeah.
6 is trustees hold each other accountable for following these ground rules. No single trustee can sidetrack the board without the board's acquiescence.
That'll take diligence on the part of each of us individually and collectively.
Right, and it means that no single trustee can be singled out and blamed if something isn't going. If the board isn't being effective and isn't moving its agenda forward, it's the responsibility of the whole board. It's not the responsibility of an individual, right?
Yes.
So I think it's just this is, you know, that's what the sentiment of that is. Any concerns about that, or you're good?
I just want to reiterate, not being like that is what we got put on probation for, was not over what a single trustee did. It was the full board's lack of response to it and doing anything about it. So I just, as we move forward into accreditation years and being looked at, that is a really important one. I'm glad we all agree on it, but I don't want to breeze by it without highlighting its importance.
I think that's great information. I think it's really good to bring up, really helpful. And I do think these are more straightforward and less proceduralistic at the bottom. I don't think it's just that everyone's tired and wants to go home that we get to these. The harder ones are at the beginning. And the last 2 are pretty straightforward. 7 is continued board development occurs through the purposeful application of these agreed upon ground rules during productive work sessions. And so this was what I mentioned earlier about the efficiency is you're building in sort of self-training all of the time because you commit to having these rules in front of you. Some of the boards I've worked with have them laminated and on the dais with them. You know, I'm not saying you have to go that far, but that you are always conscious that you have committed to these and that you're thinking about how you are working to promote these through all of your interactions. And I think it becomes your new muscle memory. It's part of how you do a reset for yourselves to the extent you need one, is just to be very committed to being thoughtful about following through. So any amendments or agreement with 7?
No.
And then the last one is also really just sort of a statement of to help, I think, everybody feel very positive about what it is that you're doing here. And it kind of goes back a little bit to that early comment I made that you are all educators. Everybody learns from the way the board acts, and you set the tone at the top. How can we ask employees to behave in a respectful and collegial way if they come to board meetings and they don't see their trustees acting that way? How can we discipline students for when they come to that sort of thing, right? And one of those pieces is encouraging our administrators and faculty and staff to embrace the evaluation process and self-reflection and as part of professional development. And so it's just a reminder that by engaging in transparent professional development activities, the board and chancellor lead by example. And so that this is not only an inward beneficial document and set of actions, but externally so, because you are setting the culture, the work culture for the institution by being transparent and doing this work.
Laura, I believe the statement that the board and chancellor lead by example is very strong, and I think that should begin this number 8. So maybe just say the board and chancellor will lead by example by engaging in transparent professional development activities.
Okay.
Yep.
What in the world did I just do?
I don't know, because I'm still looking for the screen. I don't know what happened here. And
Well, the screen share is not up anymore.
Oh, so the document's not there for
No,
Right,
when she took her video off, then when she went to her phone, the screen share went off. I'm just reading off, at least for me, I'm just reading off my documents.
Yeah, I have that too.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, I thought that I just went off the video. I didn't go off. I didn't hang up anything, so I do not know why that would have happened. How strange.
So time check here while we're at a little pause here. The chancellor has informed me that item 6 can be held over to the regular meeting next week of August 11th. So Laura, that gives us a little bit of additional time to get through the next item as well.
Okay, and by any chance, did the document come back up?
Yep, they did.
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank
I don't know.
you, Dan, if you had a hand in that.
Yeah, I just did it. I don't know why
Okay.
it disappeared, but I just
Okay.
I think maybe we went to the break, it cut everything off. because it went back to the IT screen. I think
Gotcha.
that's what happened. Okay, so here we are again. Oh, so you didn't see me make the other change.
Right, number 8.
But this is the board and chancellor lead by example. And then this is all one sentence, right? That's how.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Does that look good?
Yep.
And so that's it.
Okay.
And give me 1 second because I want to make sure I save this before I. Oh, hold on. I'll do this later. What
It is not your day.
I'm technologically challenged here. Okay, what I'm doing is a little bit of a Ruth Goldberg. I'm not sure what will happen when you take down your when we close the meeting. So I'm just pasting this. I just want to make sure I'm saving this to my computer with all of the edits that we just did. So give me 1 second. And the only reason I'm making you suffer through this is because if I tell you to leave first, I don't want to discover that once you're gone, I can't save it. Okay. Okay, it is now saved to my desktop, just in case when you leave, it cuts off. Okay, good. So this is done. Then this is just, everyone has to sign it in blood, and then we're done.
All right. So I just want to offer.
This is not an action item, but it is just a, are you all going to agree to, I suppose you can act on it. It is, I'm not sure it's really an action item on the agenda, but it's just a matter of whether you are agreeing with each other that you're going to adhere to these principles. This is just a private, it's an agreement among you that you're going to commit to doing this with each other.
Yeah, I just want to offer a comment. Well, I like the revised document, number 1. And in particular, I like the revised ground rule number 4. And, the comment was made that we spent a lot of time on that, and I agree. I don't think the comment was made out of exasperation or impatience. It was a recognition of, hey, we got more work to do. Also that it provided some certainty as to the process in handling that topic addressed by number 4. And I think that will serve us so very well in the future in an area that I think has caused problems in conducting business at our board meetings. So thank everyone for their input on the whole set of ground rules, but in particular, that one that seemed pretty important to each of us.
So I would love it if everybody, I didn't, there was a resounding silence when I said, is everybody going to commit to following these internal ground rules?
Yeah.
And I'll leave it to you, Bernardo, to encourage, to hear from your colleagues. I don't want to browbeat.
Well, thank you. And that's why I jumped in and offered my comments. And I will ask my colleagues, beginning with, well, I think Josh Chancellor, as in your role as vice chair. And what say you on these revised ground rules?
No, I support them. Some of them are hard. I'll just say this. Some of them are really hard for me to fully grasp or understand without examples. And I think that's just me being a new trustee, because like there was some reference made to past accreditation issues. And even on number 4, things will still come forward that I can predict other trustees might not feel that the certain information is, sorry, I got a dog, it is important or relevant, so to speak. But I think it's a great starting place from 2015 document to now. So I'm more than willing to go through these ground rules moving forward. And that's the nice thing about ground rules is just like with my little ones, they can always change again if they need to. So yeah, I'm more than comfortable where we are right now.
Thank you for sharing that personal perspective on this. And let me just say real quickly, there will always be different perspectives and possibly different decisions from each of us. But the ground rules, as I see, especially that operative phrase of acting in good faith, will help each of us accept the outcome probably better than we have in the past. Trustee McKay.
I'm very comfortable with them. I think we are gelling better, and I think that's that. I think we have acted in good faith. All of us have, but we've also, there's just that time of getting to know each other, getting to know those nuances. I'm sad about, however many meetings we've missed having in person. I'm sad we couldn't do this meeting in person because there is just that part of being in the room with somebody and getting to spend that break time even with somebody else. So I think we've done a good job of making the best of a tough situation, and like everybody else has. But I look forward to when we can also meet again together in the room, even if it's just the 6 of us, the 5 of us, and the chancellor, and other people Zoom in when we get to at least that comfort zone and we can be physically distanced. I just want to say that I look forward to being able to put these into practice, but being in the room with my fellow trustees again.
Thank you. Trustee Torres.
I just want to echo what Trustee McKay said. I'm looking forward also to when we can all be together in the same space, in the same physical space, because there's value, and that's who we are as human. And I apologize, I don't know if you can hear my dogs, but they also want to be part of this. I feel it's a living document. And so just like these are our ground rules, and this is where we are now. And then as like a relationship, as it's continuing to move forward and people are getting to know each other, and we know where each other is coming from, there might be changes, but I feel it's really good. It's a beginning step. And I think one of the things that Laura said was always assume the best from each other, and knowing that the questions or the comments are always coming from a good place. And sometimes we might not understand what that is, but I think in these last couple of meetings that we've had together as a board, I think we've been able to do really good work, just understanding one another, because you come in and it's business, but we're humans, and humans have personalities. And I just feel from where we started at the beginning to where we are now, I think there's more of that collegiality among us, being able to understand each other. There's been different events prior to COVID where we got to know a little bit of each other. So I really appreciate that we went over our ground rules. I think they're good, and I think it's a starting point, and they're definitely, we'll continue adding to it as we continue moving forward.
Thank you. Trustee Kennedy.
Yes, I think it's wonderful, and as Trustee Chancellor said, it's a lot better than 2015. I spent decades in quality councils and quality management and Six Sigma in my jobs, and we always had ground rules right there at the table topics in the middle, and we would remind each other, oh, remember that ground rule. And so I'm hoping that we can, now that we've all committed to it, that we can, I don't mind people calling me out. Well, what about ground rule 2? I'm just throwing that number out. I haven't read it. I'm not referring to it. And I don't mind people saying to me, well, Larry, remember about ground rule 2. So, and it's great. I'm in.
You know, I just realized a possible grievous oversight. I know these are the ground rules for the Board of Trustees, and so our student trustee has not had an opportunity to weigh in, and so I'm not asking her to visit each of these ground rules, but just this, if you could summarize maybe how you view our operating ground rules, student trustee, if you care to.
Hello. I like how everybody's on the same page of keeping accountability important when it comes to these meetings, and I really like how everybody was working in on these new ground. Apologies, my daughter came in. And I have no complaints here. I mean, I'm still new to this, and I feel like I'm learning as I go, and I really like what I was listening to today. So,
Are you going to do the trustee workshop this week?
yes, I am. I already I have my profile already set up, and we start at 8:45 on Thursday.
You're ahead of me. I don't have my profile done, but I will see you on Friday. Like
Oh,
this.
okay, perfect. Yeah, I have my agenda. I got the packet. I've been going over it, so I'm excited.
Good. I hope it works well versus over Zoom. I'll be interested to talk to you afterwards.
Yes, awesome. Thank you.
Okay, Laura, you happy now? The board has weighed in.
I do think we should hear from the chancellor.
I am going to ask. I am going to ask for the chancellor, but I just wanted to answer your first question about.
Oh yes, yes. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I was just holding off on asking Greg because, again, like I said, this is the Board of Trustees ground rules, but Greg is certainly a key element in these ground rules. So, Chancellor.
Yes, thank you. So I'd like to, thank Laura for working with, all of the trustees in developing, revising these ground rules. I think some really important changes were made that'll really be helpful for us in being productive and effective as we work together in setting strategic direction for the district and really accomplishing the important, business of the district that needs to happen, at each board meeting we have every month. So just want to thank the board for your collaborative work together in creating a great set of ground rules and your commitment to following them as a group together too.
Great, thank you. Okay, then we're ready to move on then to item 5.02, establishment of fiscal year 21 board professional development and performance goals. And this is where Laura will help emphasize the distinction between the board performance goals and the academic year goals. So Laura, you're still on?
I'm here. I'm okay. I'm sorry. I missed my cue. I'm on the line. What do you want me to speak to? Board performance goals versus institutional goals?
Well, 502. We have the two areas of goals. One is board performance goals, ongoing board performance goals, and the other was academic year board goals. And if we have to view them from the institutional perspective as well, like we did earlier.
No, I didn't. So I think that there are I think the long-standing sort of board performance goals are more long are sort of more long-term goals. And I would be focusing on the annual goals and drawing on what came out of the evaluation process and areas for where you see areas for growth as a board. I would say I would make as a goal the consistent adherence to the ground rules.
Okay.
You know, and that becomes something that you evaluate yourselves on in the coming year. That becomes a nice measurable set of rubrics even that you utilize this as a tool.
That's helpful.
And then I think, I mean, we certainly went through when we went through the board evaluation process, I think you identified areas to where you wanted to improve. And I actually think that the ground rules address some of them around the collegiality during meetings and some of the other things that you addressed. Making your meetings focused on the initiatives and goals of the district. I actually think that adhering to these that's a tall order for the year, and I think I think goals should be achievable, and I think that would be a great goal.
And could you please just restate that again?
Consistent adherence to the ground rules that the board has established.
Okay. Yeah, right. I thought you kind of had a second one.
No.
Yeah, no, that probably does say it all. Any of the other trustees?
I think we can take out number 4.
Looking at the last set of goals, and was that Trustee McKinney was starting to talk?
Yeah, I just said I think that we can take out number 4.
Is there something that you're looking at on the screen that I'm not seeing? I don't see a number 4.
It's in our agenda packet, item 502.
Well, I didn't get it. I didn't
sorry.
have that.
Oh, I had you at a disadvantage. I'm sorry. Diane, you're talking about number 4 in the academic year goals?
Yeah, the academic year goals. I just thought we could, I mean, I actually, it doesn't sound like we're terribly prepared for this. I mean, I think that given, again, we talked about the gap year. This is what I was talking about, that we're going to have to really watch trends and expenses. We don't, there's a lot of information we don't know. We don't know when we're going to be able to have students in classrooms again. We don't know. I just would hope as a board that we can really work together using the ground rules to help our students succeed in a really tough environment. We've talked about the hard to teach. I'm concerned about the hard to learn. Those basic math classes that, students are going to have to learn online instead of in a classroom, and how difficult that's going to be. So I just think really keeping student focused and, obviously our staff and faculty that have to be on campus, keeping them safe. Mm-hmm. But, with the resources that we have available to us, really helping students succeed and getting through what may be a full academic year, but certainly at least a start with classes online, which is not ideal learning for all of, for all students.
Diane, let me ask you a question. You've mentioned it more than once about tracking college trends, and I'm guessing that may be based on meetings or discussions you've had in your other roles. Can you just amplify or elaborate on that for the benefit of the board?
It would be, it's actually in the finance budget that Andy and I are working on doing a webinar. And it talks about, as trustees, it's your job to manage the budget of the district, but also to look at any financial trends at each of the colleges. And that might be whether it's at a certain college, we're seeing, deferred maintenance problems. Maybe it's, because Ventura College is older. Any of those things, but watching those financial trends at each of our specific colleges in addition to the district is what the mandate in the preparation we're doing for the webinar is. And actually it's in the new trustee budget training as well, is to, if you're not watching what the budget trends are, if you don't see something coming that whether it's your staff and your staff and benefit costs are going up 1% each year, and pretty soon you're going to be above 92%, whatever those trends might be, or they might be good trends that they're going down, and you have unspent funds and you don't know where they're going to be invested. Whatever that is, those trends are, we're supposed to watch those.
Okay.
Chair.
Trustee Kennedy.
So if we're just covering first, well, my assumption is we're looking at the year that ended, and we're ascertaining, how we might change those for the new year.
Correct.
So the pandemic has caused us to have to quickly innovate. And, you read that everywhere in the LA Times or Wall Street Journal, the pressure on education and on teachers and on classified. So I don't know, I don't have a suggested wording, but somehow to support the faculty and the classified in their innovation. They're working off campus, and so this is like so huge. I taught 4 years online, and it's very difficult. It's very hard on the teachers, and so I don't know how we would word it, because it's not operations. It's more like supporting professional development for both classified and faculty.
Chair?
Trustee Chancellor.
Yeah, I would agree with Trustee Kennedy on that. I would just also add, as we look at ways of supporting faculty, classified managers, the changing modality of learning, or the delivery of learning, we're also going to have to really support students in a different way as well. And I know the organization understands that, and the people working within the organization understand that, but I think it would be a good place for a goal aligned with that. I also agree with Trustee McKay in a sense of, and that word that Trustee McKay used, it surprised me when I heard it at our last board meeting when we interviewed legal firms. And we heard it multiple times, and it was, we don't oversee the budget, we manage the budget as a board. And that is in the CCLC handbook and in different presentations. But I think it's intentional that word is there. And it's also very clear that it's within our role, and that can be accomplished without getting into operations. But it is truly our duty to manage the budget and oversee the budget and see the budget. So I think that transitioning number 4 to capturing that, because there are so many changes with our funding and uncertainty, to make sure that we as a district have a goal, a board goal, to support our colleges, but also provide that oversight and management to adapt to different funding formulas or different funding challenges, I would say.
Karen?
Hold on a second, Trustee Torres. So, Josh, did I hear you start to say you maybe had some suggested rewording? You said number 4. And then...
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd like to capture what Trustee McKay mentioned, in a sense of providing some management of, changing budget scenarios in relation to, increased uncertainties. And that's not the language. I'm just saying something
Yeah,
along
right,
those
okay.
lines. I'm not good at crafting language. It's not my strong suit, but I guess I'm just trying to summarize the points that Trustee McKay made, and also Trustee Kennedy, in a sense of supporting faculty, staff, managers, but most importantly, the way we support students with
Right.
this pandemic is going to have to drastically change as well. And I know we're doing that already, but it's good to, I think, have some language to support it.
Could I make a quick comment? In comparing your ongoing goals and your 2019-2020 goals, it's not immediately apparent what the differences are in some of the instances, because some of them could be ongoing goals, but presumably there was something situational about what was going on in 2019-2020. It sounds to me that what Trustee Chancellor is talking about is more of an if you're talking about what you see as the board's ongoing role, then maybe what you're talking about is something that belongs in the first set of goals rather than the time-sensitive goals. And it may mean that it needs more discussion. I know the issue around how much oversight you should be giving on the budget is an ongoing issue that you are discussing. But I am hearing it as the way the Trustee Chancellor has framed it as what is the board's overarching role in this area, and what is the role it should be playing. So it seems to me that belongs up in the first set of goals, the ongoing board performance goals, rather than in the academic year goals.
No, I agree with you on that. I think it got a little blurry because this is a new practice for the board. So, or I shouldn't say that, I don't know because I'm new, but in my short time here, it's a newer practice of diving in a little deeper, requesting certain information. But I agree with you, Laura. I think it should be an ongoing and more appropriately placed in the first column.
And maybe there's a way to punt on this a little bit, because I'm guessing there may be a lot of discussion around this, and that one way to address, Trustee, your concern without at this late hour having a deeper discussion around where the line is between, appropriate management and oversight and administration, is to say something that the board will play its appropriate role in managing the budget. And what that role is something that may evolve and may involve further discussion, but then that becomes at least an acknowledgement that that is one of your core responsibilities, and that you're continuing to develop in that area. That might be one way to handle it. And my suggestion is, in part, hearing Josh's concern by elevating this to an ongoing rather than just an academic year, but holding off on trying to describe what that is right now.
I think
anyway,
it still goes in number 4, just it goes in the other number 4, where we talk about measurements of institutional effectiveness, optimizing performance-based funding model. We get into money in that number 4, and maybe that's where we can spell out something that we could agree on.
You mean in the ongoing goal number 4?
Yes, the ongoing goal number 4.
You could do that. And then the only other comment I was going to have, and then I'm going to be quiet and listen again, is that I think a number of you have made comments as I've been listening around how the particular goals that you have right now are going to be different and impacted by the pandemic. And I'm wondering, because there are annual goals that are very time specific, like the AB 705 implementation was very specific to that year. I kind of think that managing the pandemic and addressing both issues of employee safety, students' access and success, however you want to put it, might be worthy of its own goal this year, that you're going to help steward the district through this extraordinary period. It seems worthy of its own recognition, perhaps, rather than just referencing it in context of other goals.
Well, and I think for me that gets back to the idea I mentioned before about the district should be actively engaged and providing leadership and direction in responding to the effects of the pandemic in regards to, you know, what we can see is there will be a changing job market, and there will be an economic recovery that the community colleges will have a place in, and so I don't know how to articulate that. I'm a better editor than I am a creative writer, you know. And,
I mean, what
so
we've done in the past is actually two of us as a committee would take a stab at, I mean, these need a full-on rewrite that I don't think
Yeah.
at this hour we're ready to do.
okay.
And so I don't mind working with someone and, you know, taking a stab at a rewrite. And I hate to tell you this, Josh, we did it in policy committee. So I know you don't want to write, but you and I think between the two of us, we could take a stab at getting these maybe a little more functional for now and then bringing them back.
One thing that's good about the goals as they are written, and I'm just noting it if you're going to be drafting goals in a committee, is to notice that all of the, and I'm just looking at the academic year goals because that's as much as I can fit on my phone screen at any one time. I pulled this up out of the agenda, is they all are in terms of support, assist, approve, manage. I mean, they all begin with a board level verb of sorts, right? So,
Right.
so I would be careful in setting the goal that you're not just looking at the area that is of interest or concern, but what's the board's level of role in this. I think that similar to goal 4 under the ongoing goals, where to support the chancellor in blah, blah, blah. Sorry for being inarticulate. But to me, the chancellor has an enormous job this year. Every chancellor does. And in figuring out how to lead in the pandemic. I think support the chancellor in something along those lines, or some other framing of where the board's role is in what's going to be a very, very challenging area that involves a lot of technical. This is the hardest law I've ever practiced.
Yeah.
Is advising on the pandemic. And so it's complex. You have labor issues and safety of employees. You have student access and equity issues. You have fiscal. It's very, very complex. So maybe a goal that's structured similar to your ongoing goal number 4. There's a lot of detail in there, but it's all around the chancellor's plan and the chancellor's goals. I just think about how to structure it would be my one comment.
Okay,
Oh,
well, I
just
appreciate that, but I did write this set, so I was just gonna kind of.
Oh, good.
So
a quick comment on your suggestion, Diane, on an ad hoc committee. Yeah, that's a good idea, and then it ties into a previous interest for the work of an ad hoc committee as well. So the chancellor wanted to say something, and after the chancellor, then Trustee Torres.
Yeah, just a couple things real quick, and Laura, maybe you can help us with this, because one thing I was wondering is, do we even really need this breakdown of the two criteria of goals? Because to me, 10 goals is a lot. It'd be great if we could get it down to maybe a fewer number, but it seems like each year we'd evaluate which ones continue to carry on anyway and which ones are new for that year. And to me, it just kind of seems to confuse it a little bit to have this breakdown, but that may just be me. I mean, to me, I'd look at it, let's have board goals for the year and let's tie them to, our our COVID transition plan, as well as our operational framework and some of the things we're doing. And that I'd be glad to, work with Trustee McKay and whichever other trustees with her on helping to draft some goals for the rest of the board to look at. But interested in your thoughts around the organization of it and the number to have.
I can tell you how it happened because I did it. Is we had very specific goals of we wanted to get our effective trusteeship certificates done. And so that's how we ended up with an annual goal, because we all wanted to complete that within a specific period of time. And so like anything, it grew from the best of intentions into a monster.
Yeah. Trustee Torres?
Thank you. I just wanted to add, and I don't have exactly the language, but one of the things when we look at number 5, regarding, let's say, AB 705, what we're really also looking at is student equity. And so right now, we talk a lot about access, student success, but it's student equity, because to me, that's really important that our students, that there's a plan in place, that our students are going to be able to have access to their education, but differently. They have devices, they will have hotspots, but it's how do they assess the instructional material, that dialogue with their professors, with tutoring center, to ensure that there's equity. And how does equity look like? And I think providing that support to all of our stakeholders on our campus, from our faculty, or from our staff, from administration, because everything's new to them. This is a time where it's never been seen before. Prior knowledge, background knowledge, it's no longer in existence. Everything's new. And so definitely having those systems in place of support and that equity of, so it becomes that systemic, right? Because after we have our systems, it becomes that systemic change that we're looking in terms of really dealing with a lot of those barriers that our students have had. The other piece is, and that's looking at our metrics, but I know that's more into, the academic senate and the different groups that we have to determine what that looks like, but definitely with an emphasis in equity coming from our board, that's needed here, that's one of the items we're looking at. I also want to see the involvement of our student trustee and our students at the discussion table. I remember in our meeting in June, there was a meeting when they were looking into graduation. They were looking into the drop of students that withdraw from our colleges, and our student trustee at the time was invited to sit down and say, what are the needs of our students? What are we hearing? So I'd like to have our student trustee be able to have a seat in those conversations and be able to provide feedback and support in terms of how do we continue moving forward in helping students. I know when she shared along with Lorena in our June meeting, and they mentioned how students were having a difficult time being able to learn online. And you would think maybe they would know because they're college students. So if we didn't hear from a student, we would assume, well, they're older, they're in college, they should be able to do biology perhaps. But when you have students say, I can't learn, it's hard for me. And I know I'm in college, I might be 20 some, but statistics, biology, chemistry, I can't do it. And then that informs our decision, and they're the ones, everything we're doing here is for our students. And so I just want, as we're moving forward, that we write down here that it's reflected that there's going to be a space for our student to be able to provide that feedback as we're moving forward making decisions.
Okay. Is there any other trustee that is interested in working with Trustee McKay on an ad hoc committee to come up with the draft annual goals?
I'll work with her, Vice Chancellor. I know Vice Chair Chancellor has a lot on his plate being Vice Chair. So I know he's in the policy committee, but Josh, if you need help, I'm happy to take it. If you want to go ahead and work on this, that's okay too. Or if there's another trustee that's interested.
No, I'm more than comfortable having you work with Trustee McKay, of course. Thank you for offering.
I may have misunderstood. I thought trustee, not on the committee, but on on the annual goals versus just one set of goals. Trustee McKay, were you saying that you thought is that providing that sort of historical memory that going back to just a single set of goals that are refreshed and renewed every year, but not labeling them as annual goals is the way you thought you should go?
Yeah, I mean, cutting them back and really kind of taking a laser look at what we should. There are going to be, I think, by nature of where we are, some goals that may only, hopefully will only be annual goals just by virtue of this pandemic. Maybe it has gotten better. But I think that we're going to have to look at it through the lens of the pandemic and the lens of, you know, long-term equity, which, you know, both, that we need both of those lenses, but I don't think we need to have the separation. And then, you know, the notation of the strategic goal that it supports, that was just something I did because academics do that. So I was, you know, trying to look like an academic.
So I didn't answer your question. I think it's a good idea to go to a single set. As you asked me, I think it makes sense after, especially listening to Trustee McKay's institutional memory on how it evolved. So, but I wasn't sure whether it was clear what direction the ad hoc committee was getting, whether whether everyone agreed that you are now going to a single set of goals that the ad hoc committee is going to create, or whether they're replicating the same current model. And it sounds as if everyone's good with going with a one set, but I just, being the fly on the wall sort of, I wasn't sure that had been made clear.
Thank you. And I was going to ensure that we had clarity on that. I didn't want to have a wasted effort by the ad hoc committee.
I mean, unless when we sit down to write them, there's two goals that are so, you know, obviously that they're not they're short-term goals, then, you know, we'll have to discuss that at that time. But I think that the direction is clear.
Okay. Trustee Kennedy, do you agree with that assessment?
Yes, I do. And
Okay.
especially in view of Trustee McKay's explaining the origin, because I'd forgotten how we got these.
Yeah.
Chair
So I want to leave another issue regarding ad hoc. There was an interest in an ad hoc committee to be formed.
You've got two hands before you move
Oh,
on.
I'm sorry.
The Chancellor and Laura.
I was looking down. I'm sorry. Who was first?
Go ahead, Laura, and then I'll go.
My only other 2 cents, because I said it early on in the conversation, and I just wanted to get lost. I think it would be a good idea to make one of the goals something around consistent adherence to the ground rules. And I think what that does, as well as just being good for institutional health, when you get your accreditation review, I believe that is going to be a very good piece, because you did get some pretty strong feedback in the surveys, and this shows a level of responsiveness to the feedback that you received. And I think that's very positive in your accreditation conversations as well.
Well, I know I wrote that down, and I'm sure Trustee McKay heard that, your comments as well. She's shaking her head, so, okay. Trustee, Chancellor, did you want to say something?
Yeah, so again, I'm Trustee McKay. You know, I took pretty detailed notes as well. So again, when you're meeting, if you'd like me to be involved, I'm glad to join in there as well.
Thank you. Trustee Torres and I might meet in our, you know, socially distanced, but it might be easier for us if there's an office open at the district office to do it in person. It is something that's difficult to do this way. So we'll just have to see how that works out, what we can do safely.
Yeah, we could coordinate to use the boardroom or something where there's plenty of room.
Okay, so I'm in somewhat, I've created a dilemma here for myself, because I was starting to say there had been a previous interest in an ad hoc committee to be formed to address receiving input from stakeholders, students and others dealing with issues of I forget the exact wording, Trustee Chancellor or McKay, can you restate them for everyone's benefit? Something to deal with the hiring processes and.
Well, the board is long, to make a short story long, we have for long before this board even was elected, we had wanted to revisit the HR policies on the hiring of the chancellor, the presidents, and the vice chancellors.
Right.
And we asked for the board to have input on the front end before it went through the committees, only to have the board disappointed that our input wasn't heard. In the process of that in policy, and now with this lens of equity, the students had and faculty had a very strong desire to have at least one informational ad hoc meeting before Trustee Chancellor and I looked at these policies so that we could have a more informal discussion. We could do it within the policy committee, but it just seemed that ad hoc committees are a little less formal and more people could participate and provide that input it was more for the equity lens. I mean, the board, we know I think I have an idea of what the board wants to see, but there was you could go back and watch that Zoom meeting of the policy committee, and there was a lot of strong feelings about having input in the diversity piece of our hiring policies.
Right, and my concern, excuse me, Laura, if I may, my concern was I just wanted to make sure that we were operating in a compliant manner and not having an ad hoc committee essentially do the work of a standing committee. So that has been clarified. If we make sure that the ad hoc committee's focus is not something generally in the purview of the standing committee, then we can go ahead.
Our attorney has her hands over her face like she's going to explode.
Okay.
So I'm thinking we ought
Yeah,
to.
Go ahead,
So
Laura.
I've given you a legal opinion on this, which I don't want to discuss in a public meeting. So I'm trying to figure out how to guide you. I didn't expect this to be coming up, so I'm trying to figure out how to navigate for you on this in an open meeting.
Well, we can drop the topic. We have the one ad hoc committee that I think I'm free to appoint, and that is Trustee McKay and Trustee Torres to come up with working with the Chancellor to come up with the draft goals for the coming year. Is that fair to say?
Oh yeah, there's no problem with that at all. And I do think, because I don't want to be stop your productivity and going forward. If I'm thinking about what you just said and what I advised, and I think I can provide some guidance. If you would like to get this resolved today, I think I can speak generally about this, but that's up to you. I don't want to throw a wrench, but I got a little bit concerned because you did ask for a legal opinion and I gave you one. So,
well, I am interested
in responding.
I am interested in responding to the interest of trustees in forming an ad hoc committee. So if you can continue helping.
Yeah, I think what I like the idea of is an ad hoc committee that would look at the range of ways that the district or the board could support diversity. What I think is problematic is for it to look at the policies. You have a policy committee. And so taking something that would happen in a meeting that's subject to the Brown Act, especially in an area of high public interest, and putting it into an ad hoc committee where it could be done outside of the public eye, I think would be something that would concern me. So the
It would-
specific look at policy. But there are a whole range of things that could be identified as ways to support workforce diversity that an ad hoc committee might look at in a more expansive way. What are the things we can do to be promoting workforce diversity as a district? What resources would those require? What policy revisions might they require? What staffing might they require? Whatever, and look at it in a broader way. And I also think that it sends a positive signal. You do lead from the top, and if improving the diversity of the workforce is a priority, then having a committee that's dedicated to looking at the different ways that you can impact that seemed like a positive message. So I could see having an ad hoc diversity committee of some sort, but my concern is that I think the policy work should stay with the policy committee.
Yeah, I'm sorry if it got muddy, but the intent was to get the information from those that wanted to have a voice, and then do our policy work in policy committee.
Yeah. Okay. So
When I say get information, get the diversity piece that they felt so strongly about, and hearing about that before we craft something in policy that doesn't meet all of the expectations, because we haven't touched these in years. And so I would like to hear what our students and faculty have to say on workforce diversity before rather than after we work on these policies.
Can't they
That
go
make
to the
sense?
policy meeting? But if it's a public meeting, can't the faculty and students just show up at the policy committee meeting and then give their input?
I'm so sorry, Trustee Torres, you cut out there for a second. I didn't get
Oh,
the
I'm
beginning of your
sorry.
question.
My question was, if it's an open meeting, the policy committee meeting, just like the administrative services, faculty and students or community members who are interested in providing input in the development of the policies, couldn't they just attend those meetings and provide their input at that moment, because that informs the committee members, the two board members, and they're able to hear them in that public platform?
Yes, and I do think if the purpose of the committee is to gather information that will inform policy development, that's part of the policy committee. I really do.
Okay.
For that, partly for that reason, and in particular because it's an area of such high public interest. I'm not sure how you would, anyway, that was my thought. But I do think there is a role for a committee dedicated to issues of diversity if you want to do that. I think there is a way to have an ad hoc diversity committee. I would try to disentangle that from policy development, which is done through a standing committee and subject to the Brown Act. I'm just looking at for transparency purposes.
And
that was my thought.
That intent is very clear, and we're all mindful of that demarcation, that separation.
Yeah,
So,
I know you are.
So, but thank you for emphasizing the need for that.
Yeah.
So, based on this discussion and prior interest, I would like to appoint an ad hoc committee as described in the discussion of Trustees McKay and Chancer, if they're both willing to accept serving on that ad hoc committee. Trustee Chancer?
Yeah, unless there's another trustee that's eager and has a not just an interest, but an expertise in that area.
Okay.
And I say that because I think it might benefit to have one trustee that's not on the policy committee, maybe be on the ad hoc. Just throwing it out there. I don't know.
That's a very fair point.
I mean, Chair, would you be interested?
I would, but you know what? I recognize. I mean, I like to think I'm as equally interested and supportive and want to get things done in these areas, but Trustee Torres has consistently from the beginning been an advocate on these kind of issues. So Trustee Torres, do you have time and interest in serving on such an ad hoc committee?
I do. I was just wondering why I wasn't your first choice based on my interests. But it's
Well,
okay. I just, because that's, you're explaining it. And so it's true. And so I was just going to respect your decision. But it was interesting that I wasn't your choice based on my interest in this specific topic.
well, I explained it was because of prior interest, and that was a poor phrasing, but I was not discounting in any way your prior. Are you available and interested in? And I apologize for any slight that you might have perceived.
It's okay. This is the same one we were talking before, right? The one that I said I can just do. Is it the same one, or would be something different? So there's the one.
It's something different, but we could do them at the same time. I mean, we could stack the meetings so that we don't.
Okay. Yeah, of course.
Okay. Thank you. So then this committee is formed, ad hoc committee is formed as well. Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair Chancellor.
I will just mention that any assistance that may be useful to you on that, I'm more than happy to. This is my primary practice, probably for 30 years, has been advising on designing, legally compliant affirmative action and workforce diversity programs and helping districts move the needle on that. So if you ever want to chat, it's my favorite subject.
You're just reaffirming the wisdom of the board selection of LCW. Thank you. Okay, thank you, board. That takes us then to 50, I believe that takes us to 503. Board performance. Hello? Oh, board performance evaluation process for fiscal year 21. And Chancellor, do you want to introduce? I'm somewhat at a loss on this particular item.
Yeah, I think actually I'd recommend that the board take this one on, maybe even in September or so, because we really want to get the goals set first before we then work up an evaluation tool, and we'll work with Laura on that as well. So I think we just delay this. That'd be my recommendation. Yeah.
Does the board concur with that suggestion? I do.
I concur.
Okay. Okay. All right. As well, that's the end of items 1 through 5. And as I had mentioned earlier, I think just given the time that we had set aside for this overall meeting, I think we will add item 6 to the August 11th board meeting. They're primarily informational. Okay. All right. All right.
Chair,
Trustee Chancellor, yes.
in regards to item 6, you're referencing the revenue and budget planning.
Right.
If I could make an ask or a recommendation to my colleagues on the board, just in review of this item, and I'm comfortable moving it to the next meeting, but if we can get some details on the local effects of some of the content in this presentation, that would be helpful. So not discounting what's already there, but as much information as it impacts our 3 colleges, specifically on page 42, that would be helpful if it's possible. So I don't know how my colleagues on the board feel, but that would be a recommendation or an ask.
Looking for page 42.
Chair, I want to support that as well because I'm interested in knowing how that looks like for us. So when I reviewed the information, I know I got to see it before everybody else in the administrative service. And so of course at that time it was just something that had just come out. But I'd like to see also how it would impact us at the locally, just like Trustee mentioned. So I just wanted to voice that as well.
Okay. In light of the very recently adopted new ground rules, I can appreciate the way in which Trustee Chancellor presented his request/ask. And I would just say that I can support a response from staff for the next week's meeting because they have consistently been enhancing the information as it becomes available even to them, and where they can kind of forecast any impacts to the district and the colleges. So Chancellor, I think it would be fair to say, and this is before I'm even hearing from Trustees McKay and Kennedy, that your staff will be providing some response to the question, to the ask, with the up-to-date information you have on potential impacts to our colleges, which will probably change the following week, or potentially, but certainly by the time we have, getting to adopt the final budget, this will be a iterative, continuing process. Trustees McKay or Kennedy?
Absolutely. I'm in full support of it. It'll be interesting. 2 days later, I'm going to work on the Thursday trustee webinar on this with Andy Selesky, the Chief Business Officer from Butte College. And that's, we're going to have to look at it from a statewide level. So it'd be great to look at it from our lens when we look at it for our district.
Trustee Kennedy?
So is this something readily available, or is there an estimate on whether this would be that's attainable by staff by the meeting time?
Good question.
Yeah, so are you ready for me to
Yes.
provide some input? Okay, thank you. Yeah, so the information here as far as budget adjustment targets and what would be happening in these different categories at the different colleges is something that we're still working to develop. So just this Friday, I have a retreat with the Chancellor's Cabinet. Again, one of the things we're going to be doing is starting to prioritize some of these items here, as well as supporting the colleges as they're working on their individual budget scenarios, because some of the items here are going to require some participatory governance discussions at the colleges around some of these reductions and what they'll be. But what I'll do is I'll work with Vice Chancellor El Fatal, the presidents, on Monday, and if there's things within this table that we can complete and fill in by Tuesday, we'll do that. If we don't have anything to fill in yet, I'll be able to provide a timeline or a deadline when we would have it. And definitely, as we approach the October approval of the adopted budget, we should be able to have this filled in, but I can't commit yet to what we'll have for next Tuesday. Got to get a chance to talk with Dave.
Right, and the ask was presented, if I recall correctly, Trustee Chancellor, to the extent possible. And so with the board, I think would appreciate the best efforts working within the realities that you work within, Greg. So, okay. All right. Well, if there's no other comment or questions, I want to thank everybody for your very productive participation. Laura, thank you tremendously. And I'm sorry I threw you that curveball. I on that one goals item.
Well, we rolled with the punches, and I think got to a good place. I think it's great to have an ad hoc committee that's identified diversity as its focus and priority. I think it sends a really good message, and it just was a matter of crafting its scope so that to ensure that the policy work stays transparent and in the policy committee. And I think the two can work together.
Okay. And thank you, student trustee, for your participation as well. And to everyone else in the viewing audience for your patience and forbearance and stamina in watching us do our work. So with that, then we will adjourn this meeting and look forward to seeing everybody and more next week at our regular board meeting. Everyone have a pleasant rest of the evening. Stay healthy, stay safe, and thanks again.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.